Today's video is about replacing slack adjusters, and I want to welcome you back to the channel and thank you for coming back, and hoping that you're enjoying these videos. And go ahead and leave me a comment, any kind of suggestions that I might be able to provide as far as content goes. But I did a few things to kind of try and speed this film up a little. Or I've already built the air pressure up on the truck, released the brakes. I already backed the brake shoes off on the axle that I'm working. Okay, I just climbed underneath the truck. There are several different types of slack adjusters. You have one style that is self-adjusting, which means it's supposed to adjust the brakes to the right specs every time you go ahead and hit the brakes. Sometimes that works, sometimes they don't. Well, these here are not adjusting and like they should, and they're not holding the adjustment. It's not so much for me as whether they'll work as far as self-adjusting. It's more about whether they will hold the adjustment for me, because I can always climb underneath here, adjust these brakes. It's not a real big deal. It takes about 5 minutes. Okay, now on the self-adjusting slack adjusters, you do have a couple different styles. The one that I have here actually takes a 7/16 wrench or ratchet, or they do make a special tool like this one here to adjust them. And now that's one style, self-adjusting. Now there is another style that takes two different tools at one time. There's what people call a button you have to pull out, and you can use a screwdriver or the special tool, don't matter. And then there's a nut, a square bolt, or whatever you want to call it, on the slack adjuster. You can use a 5/16 wrench to go ahead and work with that one, or use a specialized tool. And then they have another self-adjusting slack adjuster that takes a 9/16 wrench. I've run into them too. I've run into all three of those styles. And now that they do also have what's called a manual adjusting slack adjuster, which it does not self-adjust because, well, the name of it, it's a manual adjust, and that normally takes a 9/16. Now I have run into a few of them that takes 3/4 wrench to adjust them, and there's a collar on them. You use the wrench to push in, and then holding that collar in, you turn the wrench to adjust them. The one we're working with today is a self-adjusting 7/16 wrench that works with this one. As you can see, there's two holes here and here. Now on this truck, we're not utilizing both of those holes. Now there are some slack adjusters where the clevis, and what I'm calling a clevis is this piece on the end of the rod on the brake chamber. Now some have two holes and you utilize both holes, but this one's not set up that way. It's only one single one, so we're only going to use the one hole. And this is fairly simple. Once you back the brakes off like I have, and you get this pin out, there's a pin right here that I'll show you. I'm going to get out here in a minute, and you take that pin out, that frees it up from the slack adjuster to the clevis. And then there's a snap ring up here that you take off, and you just slide it off. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to back the brakes off some more so we can go ahead and get that pin out, because unfortunately whoever did this truck before, they put the pin in backwards. And what's happening is the pin here is hitting the bracket for the brake chamber. So right at this present time, it will not come out. Now sometimes if you've got it far enough, you can pry back a little bit and go ahead and get it out. But unfortunately, I can't do that yet. So we're going to work with the slack adjuster and bring it out some more. Bolt is actually, or the pin can actually come out. Sometimes you have to take some to drive it out, like so. What makes it hard is when it's in the proper way, it's kind of hard to get in on that side. Now, apparently, I was having tension on the brake chamber, because once I got the pin out, the brake chamber went in, just like that. But that's the pin. Like I said, it's not a big thing. Now, when I change these, I always put new Carter pins in. And I got a box of them right here. You can buy a box of Carter pins from Harbor Freight if you want. I just like using new Carter pins because you don't know how many times the old Carter pins have been bent and how many more times they're going to withstand being bent over. So if you put a new cotter pin in, you don't have to worry about the cotter pin breaking while you're going down the road and that pin coming out. And if that happens, number one, you're not going to have any brakes on that particular wheel because your slack adjuster is no longer attached to the brake chamber. So that's a bad thing. And then the second bad thing is if you don't catch it, DOT catches it, they're going to put you out of service and they're going to red tag your truck until you do get it fixed. The next thing here is just using a pair of snap ring pliers. I've seen people use just regular screwdrivers and getting these snap rings out. It is a whole lot easier if you use snap ring pliers, so you can get in the holes of the snap ring and do it the proper way. Once you get in the holes of the snap ring, you just squeeze and snap ring comes right off. Now don't lose that snap ring because you need it to go back on. And then be careful of the washers because there are washers here. And now this one here has a bolt up here that you need to, or I should say nut, it's not actually a bolt, that actually needs to come off because there's a bracket up there on this style. See, I just took that nut off and I just set it down because might need it. And then there's a bracket up here. You can just go ahead and pry a little bit with a pry bar or whatever you have handy, really, and pry the bracket up to where the slack adjuster will come off, or actually the nut or stud will come out of that bracket, because otherwise it's going to hold you. See how I just bent it? And here's one of the washers that I was just talking about. You don't want to lose because you're going to need it going back on. And then you just slide the slack adjuster off the S-cam. Now, there should be a washer that, okay, that washer stayed on there. But you just take it off like that. And then you put the other one back on same way. You just slide it on there just like this. And this is the stud that I was talking about that has that bolt. And you just go ahead and slide it on there. And it doesn't matter what position because you can always turn it to get the adjustment you need. Now I did it this way for the camera, but you can see how I'm having a little bit of trouble getting it on because it's hitting this bracket up here with the stud. There it is. And then you go ahead and put your washer and your snap ring back on there. Hook it back up there. By turning the adjustment, it'll swing this down to the slack adjuster. You got a new slack adjuster on there. Just make sure you put the nut up here, adjust it, and do not forget to grease it. A lot of people will put these on thinking, oh, it had grease when it came. Well, that's only packing grease. You want to make sure you grease it with a grease gun after you get done. But that's all there is to it, to changing the slack adjuster. And make sure you block the wheels before you release the brakes, because you don't want to get run over trying to do this. One thing about when you're putting this back on and you put the snap ring back in, you want to make sure that snap ring's seated, because if it's not seated in there all the way going down the road, the snap ring could come out of the groove and come off, and then when your brake adjusters, slack adjusters moving, it could actually start working its way off. I mean, it usually won't happen because the clevis ain't going to let it happen, but if it can start moving back and forth, it could break something, and also DOT would red tag you for that because slack adjuster would not be securely mounted. So make sure that that snap ring is seated in that groove. You might put the snap ring pliers in there when you're putting it on and rotate a little bit, try and work it back and forth as you're releasing the pressure to make sure it is in place. Okay, go ahead and hit that bell button and subscribe, and I'll try and get another video up for you. And everybody have a better day. Thank you.